Oh, right. It does sound familiar.
Good morning. You're listening to WXOX 97.1 FM in Louisville, Kentucky. This is Artist Talk with LVA, and I'm the host, Keith Waits. The show is produced by Louisville Visual Art, and I have two people here today to talk to me who are from Squallis Puppeteers. Squallis Puppeteers has existed for 25 years and has always been dedicated to handmade and homespun. They've been making puppets, performing, and teaching children and adults in Louisville, Kentucky since 1997. In 2003, Squallis became a nonprofit organization. Their mission is to use the art of puppetry to free imaginations, create fantastic characters, and tell the stories that are important to our community. Squallis has two full-time staff, and they are my guests today, Nora Christensen and Shawn Hennessey, who conduct most of the educational programs and two-person performances. Besides his role with Squallis, Shawn is also an assistant professor and project manager at Spalding University. Nora is currently the executive director of Squallis and is pursuing a master's degree at Spalding University. And which I don't know, it's why people do crazy things like that, but we'll find out from Nora why she's doing all that. But we're here to talk specifically, again, as I said at the top, this is the 25th anniversary of Squallis Puppeteers, which is the puppeteering company in town, really, like the capital T puppeteering company in town. And they are one of the things that's happening we'll tell you about is, and we'll talk more about this, is that there is an exhibit at the Portland Museum about Squallis, which is open now, but there will be an event this Saturday surrounding that, connected to that exhibit, and again, sort of honoring the 25th anniversary. So Nora and Shawn, hello.
Hello.
Hi, nice to talk to you.
Thanks for being here. So I always like to start sort of with the beginning now. And I don't know, I know, Shawn, you studied visual art and sculpture and things like that in school. But I guess so that might explain some of this, but why puppets? Why not anything else? How did it become puppets? How was that the thing that you guys decided to do?
Well, Nora started it, so she's got a I didn't come in until, God, what was it? 2008.
2008.
So she's got a bunch of history before me.
Yeah, so Squallis started with a group of friends. It was me and my sister Carrie and my friend Jess Myers and a couple other friends goofing off, playing music, making stuff. We all dappled in all kinds of art forms, sewing things, slapping things together, lots of humor. So puppets kind of seemed a natural fit. Besides the performing part, I was never thought I'd be a performer. I was always very shy. But puppetry, both being able to blend all the things I love to dapple with, as far as making, and then getting to be funny and saying things that were meaningful, puppetry just became the perfect answer for me as a young person. So we were pretty spunky and had a lot of opinions. So puppetry provided a vehicle for us to use our voices as a group of young women trying to experiment in this awesome city. So that's how it kind of started. And I really attribute Squallis's success to being in Louisville, really. I don't know if any other city would have embraced our weirdness like Louisville has. So yeah, that's how it.
Well, that's right. You have become somewhat ubiquitous. You know, it's an unusual public event or festivity or parade or whatever that we don't see these larger than life puppets. And people just look and go like, oh, Squallis is here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody thinks anything about it being anybody else. It's like, it's Squallis.
Well, since there's been more puppet makers since Squallis started. So it's not always Squallis now, which I find kind of exciting. I love the ripple out. It's more puppetry in the city is always good.
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you also say that you started Squallis kind of because you were going to rock shows and you were kind of I wanted more of a show.
Yeah. Well, we were playing music a lot too. We weren't trained in anything. We were just experimenting a lot, but we played music a lot. I played the accordion and the bass and the drums, and Jess played the trumpet and the mandolin, and we had a lot of vocalists and things. And so we were jamming a lot, playing Beatles songs and like making up our own songs, and then go out to rock shows. And a lot of the musicians would stand with their backs to us and be all into which, there's value to that.
I think they call it shoegazing.
But we wanted a little more entertainment. And so a lot of times we'd open up for rock shows and be kind of kind of spunky and get heckled and kind of encourage this to and fro that was missing, I felt. And we didn't mind getting heckled. We thought it was fun. So we just kind of were poking it a little bit. So yeah.
Cool. Well, but before I want to stay with sort of the beginning, but I guess I'm surprised. In my mind, I just assumed that you guys were co-founders. So that's interesting to know that it had such a history before Shawn. I thought Shawn had been there all along.
Yeah.
No.
So Shawn, what brought you into Squallis? How did you get connected?
Well, it's funny. So we have a mutual friend, Suki Anderson, and I had heard about Squallis over the years through my friend Suki. And her dad, and I just kept hearing about these. I think I heard about the birth show first, and Suki's dad was like, "We did a live puppet birth," and I was like, "What are you talking about? What is that even?" And so I kept, sort of hearing about it, and then they were doing the Boxer, which was one of the earlier shows, and Suki convinced me to come down and visit. And so I came down and I saw the show at the Mex, and I met Nora and I met everybody. But everybody was stressed out. It was a big, maybe opening night. And so, neither of us barely remember meeting each other. And then we met years later and kind of fell for each other. And I started coming down and visiting Nora as we were dating, and I was teaching at Ohio State, and I was getting to know Squallis better. And I was like, wow, I never thought I had all these weird skills, these like disparate skills that I didn't think fit together in any possible way for a, livelihood. I started working at Squallis and I was like, I could use a lot of my skills here. And I just got sucked in.
Well, I guess we just say, just for the record, so people know what you're talking about, that you guys are partners in life as well as partners in Squallis.
Yeah,
yes.
We've been married 13 years. We've been together like 14, almost 15 years. Got a son and a stepdaughter. Yeah.
So was that a part of it, like to fall in love with Nora? Was it required then that you become a Squallis puppeteer?
Yes. Yes, it was. Help me.
Was that in the vows?
It was not. I was not begrudging at all. I couldn't wait to make. So one of the first things I did was I came down for a fundraiser. I volunteered for this fundraiser that Nora claims was pretty poorly attended.
Yeah.
In my mind, it was amazing. But the first thing I did as a Squallis person was I wore a giant cockroach. I
know how to woo them. I really know how to.
Right. Talk about first date. So I wore like an 8-foot tall cockroach, and everybody else was kind of stressed out at that event, and it didn't read to me. And so I was just like, I jumped on top of a dumpster and I was like dancing in this 8-foot cockroach outside of the 21C. And I thought it was like just amazing. And the whole time everybody kept coming up, who is that in there? And I thought, oh my God, I have to make my own. I have to have my own puppet. So pretty quickly I was like, no, I got to do this.
Well, and when Shawn came along, he came with all these skills that we were missing. Like, you were already teaching art, but at the college level, he had all these sculptural skills. He had ways of organizing things that we did not have. And so he came along and just kind of added this burst of a new layer and for the next wave of Squallis that we really needed. So I was thankful for that, and new inputs and new skills to add to Squallis's skill set, I guess.
Yeah, I needed it too. I was totally floundering in art. I didn't make art really at that point. I was pretty disillusioned. I felt like I had dead-ended teaching college. I was just an adjunct, and I was doing kitchens and remodeling kitchens and bathrooms and just feeling pretty blah. And performing. My first puppet was the big owl. I guess this is an appropriate time to tell the story.
Yeah, go ahead.
My very first puppet was the giant owl, which everyone loves. And I remember making it, and Nora was like, this isn't how we do things. This is weird. And I was like, I know, but I'm just going to figure it out as I go. And so, like, the head is a laundry basket with a Pringles can in there. And like, the eyeballs are Frisbees and mirrors. I had like all these weird things that I was just trying. And I had big aspirations for this puppet, and it didn't come together. Like I thought his eyes were going to blink. I thought all this stuff was going to happen. And in the end, all that happened was the head spun around. And so I was like, kind of bummed out about it. The day that I was finishing it, we were going down to the waterfront to be with My Morning Jacket, and we were going to go on stage at the end of the night and mingle beforehand. And I was like embarrassed. And I remember hot gluing. Everybody's like loading the trucks to go down to the show. And I was still hot gluing stuff. And I was like, oh, I'm so embarrassed. Like, I don't even know if I can do this. And Nora was like, just put it in the car and let's go. And so we went down there and I put on the owl and we were like down on the waterfront and they opened the gates. And all of a sudden this flood of people come running in and everybody's high-fiving the owl and flipping out and taking pictures. And I thought, oh, this is easy. Like, this is amazing. Everybody loves this. And then, you know, the end of the night, we were on stage in front of like, what, 10,000 people. I mean, it was like the biggest crowd I'd ever been in front of in my life. And I ended up center stage in the owl. And yeah, that was it. I was hooked.
Well, to stand in something you've made and watch people react to it is
Yeah.
such a strange experience. You know, for being an artist and seeing people respond and you getting to interact with them, but then also to be anonymous is really liberating. So yeah, all of that is pretty thrilling.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even when from the inside you're seeing that it's a laundry basket and Pringles can and all that. Like,
yeah. Oh, it's really funny when, yeah, that's my trick when teenage, it's usually like preteen boys who give me the most trouble in a big puppet. Like parents and kids, they just want to get their picture taken. But it's like preteen boys
skeptics
that want to poke you, and like we call it butt punching, you know, where when you're turned around, they punch you in the butt. And my trick has always been to just, first of all, show them my face and then say, hey, I made this. And then usually they like 180 and they're like, wait, you made this? How did you make this? And, you know, then you're fine.
you get their respect in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny. They thought it was a rental thing you were stuck in. They'd be more likely to torture you. That doesn't make sense to me. But I
went to the giant owl puppet factory and got it. Yeah.
You think like, oh, you feel bad for the guy, but
yeah.
So you know, I think most people think of these large scale puppets, but has it always been large scale puppets? Have you guys done a lot of stuff? I don't know what, you know, like, you know, from the beginning, were you doing puppets on that scale, or did you work up to something like that?
We started making, well, we did both. We had hand puppets. Our first puppet show was the Chicken Show, which was a rock opera about chicken rebellion. Because we were all cooks in a kitchen, the Sugar Dough Cafe, if anyone remembers it. It was a lovely time in Louisville when we all worked at the Sugar Dough Cafe. But we were cooking chickens in a big pot and picking up the carcasses and making jokes, making them talk. And we made up a puppet show based on that. And so that incorporated our music and our hand puppets and our sense of humor and our politics. And so, yeah, we debuted it on Halloween in 1997 and everyone was dressed up in costumes. It was just a great night. And so those are hand puppets. But then we also always incorporated our big puppets in some of our shows, like The Crowning was our first main stage production, which was the story of home birth. I had a home birth with my daughter and wanted to shout on the mountaintops about it. Very empowering experience. And so that show had large puppets and a style based on bunraku, which is a style we became kind of obsessed with, which is a very traditional Japanese style of puppetry, where you had to study 60 years to be a master. And we're like, let's figure this out. And so we like made up our own version of it. And
well, usually bunraku is 3 people.
Yeah.
And the master's the head and the other 2 are like learning, but they just made one person bunraku puppets.
Yes. So
blood and guts.
Yeah, and they're maybe 3 or 4 feet tall. So yeah, we have a range. We don't stick to one size at all. And for the most part, our history before Shawn was around, Jess and I really ran Squallis. Carrie helped for a while and got a job pretty quickly with Peace Education Program. And so Jess and I ran Squallis, doing educational programs, touring puppet shows to kids, doing community projects. We said yes to everything, and we worked like dogs. So we got paid very little. And so the 2 of us really built the foundation of Squallis together. Yeah, pretty much doing anything anyone asked us to do. So yeah.
Well, and you had both been inspired by Bread and Puppet, Bread and Puppet Theater, which is out of Glover, Vermont, and they're in the history books. Like,
well, they're coming through.
And they're coming through
in Louisville in December.
Yeah. But Bread and Puppet's been around since the 60s, and the idea was like a big puppet show, and then you feed people bread. And I have a performance art textbook from when I was an undergrad that has Bread and Puppet in it. Like, they're very well respected. And I think the big puppet design that Squallis has is sort of a hybrid of some of the bread and puppet designs.
So I have to say, in 2007, we went to our first national puppet festival where we brought our puppets, and we kind of been developing in our own little bubble, making up our own style. And everyone was like, what are you all doing? What is this? And, it was a mix of like, huh. And then also a mix of, that's a cool idea. I never thought. So it was kind of cool to see other people kind of doing similar things or attempting a career in this art form. But we had kind of developed our own style, being kind of isolated in Kentucky, for better or worse.
I think that could be Squallis's like motto outside of Louisville is Squallis Puppeteers. Huh.
What are you doing there, huh?
What is this?
I doubt you're going to get sued for any trademark infringement on that. But it does sort of, I mean, are there places to go formally study puppeteering or puppet construction and all those kinds of things?
The UConn, University of Connecticut?
Ironically, I grew up in Connecticut. I was born in upstate New York and grew up in Connecticut. And in UConn, 45 minutes from the place I grew up, is the only place that offers a puppetry program. So yeah, they have that. But again, I think experimentation kind of brings you to your own result more so than college might. So, I mean, I dropped out of college in my 20s to move to Louisville because I was so inspired by the art scene here and the people. And so I just was doing it instead of getting trained. I was getting trained by the School of Life. So yeah, that was really my education.
Well, because it seems to me when you talk, when I don't know, you guys know, and you're sort of explaining it to me now, but when you think about sort of a puppeteering community that's like a networking thing around the country, I would think it would be a lot of DIY and training yourself and developing your own things. If there's only one formal program, how many people are coming out of there and starting puppet programs?
Right.
Yeah, most people I think are figuring it out. Or one of the things that I learned really early on, I went with Jess and Nora to a puppet convention in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
We went down to Savannah, Georgia. And the first thing that I realized that was so unusual about Squallis, most puppet companies either make their own puppets and then do someone else's story, or they buy puppets from someone and then write their own story. And it seems, at the time at least, maybe not so much now, but at the time it was rare that people were writing and building puppets
and performing
and sort of doing it all. And that's one of the things that I think is unusual.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I'm going back to your point, Shawn, about the butt punching. It sounds like you sort of answered this, but I'm just wondering, like, has it been risky? Because I've seen Squallis in a lot of different sort of crowds and environments, and and just people on their own 2 feet can get injured in these big crowds. There's been a couple.
My biggest fear is getting like trampled or falling down in the puppet.
So is it risky?
Fire.
Yeah, I mean, I think the riskiest pinnacle risk was when I decided to learn stilt walking, and I really felt empowered being super tall and wearing a mask and all this get up. And we would make these contraptions that, oh, what a cool idea on paper. And then you're in it and you're like, oh my God, what have I done? And so for maybe 6 months, I tried to be a stilt walker and really enjoyed it. I played Zeus at the Kentucky Center in some mythical dance performance and had a great time. And then I made a whooping crane that had these wings, and I'd flap them, and then the wind came and I was like, whoa. So I was a single mom at the time with no health insurance. So I decided to stop doing that pretty cold turkey after that one gig. So that, that there are moments where you're like, okay, don't put yourself in danger. And
being on stage in front of thousands of people, that's
big
also
crowds of drunk people.
Yeah.
Forecastle could get pretty risky. Someone got punched. One person got punched, I think, in our whole Squallis history. Not us.
It's pretty good.
Where
good record.
Some drunk person at the Great Lawn saw the puppeteer in the puppet and just nailed him. So, not too bad, but definitely a danger as far as things falling apart while you're wearing it. Shawn's story about the owl, I had finished my Lincoln puppet and my head fell off.
Same show. Yeah. My first show, I was like so elated that it was an amazing experience. And Nora
I started headbanging to My Morning Jacket like you have to, and the head broke off and I caught it and I continued to rock holding.
The best part about this story is Nora was so upset, so upset that it happened. But for years after that, I would meet people and they would go, "How did you guys make the head fall off of it? Wow, how did you make Abraham Lincoln's head come off? That was amazing." Oh, it's a big secret. Can't tell you.
Yeah.
Well, I just wondered if there was certain, like, you know, as people get involved with you and start you know, getting inside a big puppet like that, are there certain kinds of things you train them to do with safety in mind? Is there a certain sort of approach you have to take?
I mean, we just went through this actually a week or so ago, because we were on stage with My Morning Jacket again at the Yum Center just a couple nights before Halloween, and so we had some new volunteers who had never been, you know, in that situation. There are a couple things. I mean, you know, one is you can't run around or make really sudden movements. Besides the fact that you'll scare everyone, it's just dangerous. You have to watch. You know, bonking your head is more you're going to hurt the puppet, not yourself. But I'm always worried about people falling off stage, falling up the stairs or down the stairs. So we tell our folks, you know, you can look down and you can see your feet through the shirt. And so that's an easy thing. You forget to do that, but you can always look down and look at your feet. If you can't see through the scrim, like, you know, the front of the puppet is see-through, but like if the lights, especially on stage or like in the sunlight, if the light hits the puppet just right, you can't see anything. And so I always say, you know, you got to stop walking. Don't keep walking if you can't see. And then you can actually hold the puppet's hand up to your forehead, which it makes it look like the puppet is holding their hand like on their chest. But
right.
You know, then you just create like a little glare. You shield the glare off your eyes, and then you can usually function.
And so to reveal your face. If you're feeling endangered, or if you're making someone cry, you can lift the scrim up and pop your face out. Sometimes it makes them cry harder.
It works for you. It doesn't work for me. When I show my face, it doesn't work at all. It just, the kid cries harder.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. I don't take it personally.
Well, let me ask you about Nora. You said something earlier about politics. I feel like there's a definite political focus in some things you've done. There's an Ann Braden puppet that I assume is still exists. I don't know if she's had a workout lately, but you know, so talk about, because I'm wondering, like, it seems to me like doing something like Squallis Puppets, you're going to be liberal. Like, you're not going to be some sort of I'm revealing myself, uptight conservative and go start a puppet company.
Right.
Natural sort of inclination for a company like this to maybe have that sort of political attitude.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common. I think I was always political even before I was a puppeteer. My mom raised me to go to protests, and so I would always be active like that. And even in 9th grade, when I was in Connecticut, we had this political show we made for high school. Like, I don't know why, like I felt so emboldened to like share my thoughts, to use art as a way to talk about it instead of writing an article or making a speech. I felt like art was a good way of doing that, or performing. And so I think puppetry allows for that a lot. And a lot of the times when Jess and I were getting started and we didn't always have consistent work, or we didn't have, you know, our schedule, like we didn't really know how to run an organization, and something would happen in our city. Like, well, I know when the Iraq war started, when we heard a protest was going on, we just get up out of our desk, grab some puppets and our drum and trumpet and join the protest, because we felt like we had resources to contribute to that movement. Or the police brutality, that's not new. It was back in those days too. There were a lot of protests with Adrian Reynolds getting murdered in jail. And I remember jumping in on those protests too, where
Ann Braden was there.
And that's where I met Ann Braden, when she was still living. And so it seemed a natural fit to want to add visual spectacle to those protests, and not to dumb it down or to decrease the message of it, but almost to lively up the crowd and support them and be like, have them have those moments where you're like, yeah,
Oh, I remember when
But it helps with the mood.
I remember when we were going down to the Breonna Taylor protests in Ann Braden.
Mm-hmm.
I kept feeling like, is this the right thing to do?
Yeah.
Like, are we trivializing the protest? And then we would get there, and first of all, everybody loved it, and second, there were always families with kids. So it was like the perfect thing to do. And yeah, it was nobody ever said like, what are you doing here with that? Like, it was.
We had to research though, because we were eventually became a nonprofit, and what the rules were that we couldn't pick a candidate to endorse, but we could support issues or disagree with issues. So we really rode that. We're like, okay,
we still do.
We'll hold our opinions about who you should elect, but we've got plenty to say about issues, and we are totally allowed to have opinions, even if we are running a nonprofit. So
I guess that keeps you from building like a Mitch McConnell puppet.
Oh, we've worked that boundary though.
That's very interesting. So in 2016, we had this conversation about 1 billion times, and we had to make a very conscious decision, like as artists, as a board, as a couple, like we had to make this decision to stay positive, because it was really tempting to just build effigies. And so we stayed really positive, and we tried to like be the light that we wanted to see in the world, so to speak. But the one thing we did was we made our own version of Emperor's New Clothes, and that show, all the characters, like the Emperor was a big pink pig with blonde hair, and we had Mitch McTurtle, who slowed everything down, and it was pretty obvious.
Yeah. Subversive. We get to be subversive.
That's right.
Yes.
Okay. No, that's cool. Well, and I just want to just take stock for a moment of what you said about it in the protests, the Breonna Taylor and Black Lives Matter protests, that there were often families with kids down there. Because I feel like people that weren't paying attention and never went down there, and I didn't go down there because I have a bad back and I'm just old, but it's like which sounds like a very lame reason, but anyway. But this idea that those were always dangerous situations, and there was just a few nights of violence at the very beginning of that, but there were days and days and days and days and days of protests that went off without an incident.
Oh, they were beautiful. They were beautiful.
Yeah. And
around a really sad,
but I mean,
beautiful. They got scary. I mean, as they went on, I went to a couple where I didn't feel safe, and I was not in a puppet. So I think you do need to pay attention and be aware of what you're walking into, especially if you're asking someone else to be wearing a puppet. I never really wanted to ask anyone to do that if they didn't feel comfortable. If they're feeling jazzed, I want to deny them. But as far as being political in our puppets, that everyone felt safe. And back, just to tell a story about back during the Bush Wars, we had puppets, and the cops would come out with their horses, and many times were pushed by horses while being in puppets. And they were saying because we couldn't be on the street or had to stay on the sidewalk, this or that. And then they eventually said we couldn't cover our faces because we probably had bombs under our puppets. This is true.
Truth bombs.
So we designed a puppet where you could see our face, and so we made a giant pea stove that stood on our shoulders, and you could see our face. What are you going to say now? Like anything they said we couldn't do, we just trying to find a workaround to still show up and do what we wanted. So
well, that was my next question. That's exactly the answer. Was did you ever have problems with police? And it's interesting. I sort of get not allowing your face. That sort of makes sense, but it also sort of, when I try to think about from the other side of it, right? It's like, if you're a police officer, you don't have a sense of humor about any of these things, I guess.
No, yeah.
For sure.
But it also seems a little silly. I mean, like, I don't know what that would have to do with whether or not you're carrying a bomb.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're pretty vulnerable in a big puppet, know?
Yeah, you're more vulnerable than most of the other people.
Yeah, we made some really giant puppets for Forecastle that were the giant Hunter S. Thompson and the 2-person shark, and those puppets were we were really vulnerable in those. If you fell, you were going to take people out. So sometimes it can be very dangerous. There is another story though about us having friction politically, which was when we made the Sex Ed Puppet Show.
Ooh. You want to go there? Okay.
Sure.
We had our daughter Stella was in middle school.
Yeah.
And we were all realizing that she wasn't going to get any sex education from public school. And so we decided, that it would be a good and horrible idea to make a sex ed puppet show.
She was not horrified.
No, she wasn't actually. I thought she was going to.
Her friends kept asking, when's that show going to get done? We want to see it.
But, we created this show, and I think we did it at the Rudd and maybe one or two other times. And then no school.
Rudyard Kipling that used to be there on is it Oak Street?
Oak Street, yep.
Yeah. And then no school would have us. Every school was like, no,
Are you a sex ed puppet show? Oh, heck no. No. But at the time we were renting from the Archdiocese, an old Catholic school building. We had our Planned Parenthood stickers on our car, and they found out about the show and they asked us to stop working with Planned Parenthood. And we said no. And so they evicted us.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we kind of wear that as a badge of honor, actually. So
I don't know. I guess they have to.
Yeah.
To take that position.
Well, so do we.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, we have to.
Exactly. Well, that's curious. Well, I know you seemed worried about telling that story, but you did it with great discretion and all that.
We didn't talk about the content of the show.
Yeah. It was good.
It was sex education. So it was about, safe sex and contraception and respect for body, stuff like that, right? I mean,
that's right.
Awareness of yourself. Mm-hmm.
Awareness of yourself. I think that's such a problem with sex education. It's always, the opponents of it always think like you're teaching people how to have sex.
To want to have sex, yes.
Or to want, like they won't want to have sex until you talk about it.
Right, yeah.
No idea.
What is the sex you're talking about?
Well, and I think we know from human nature that people just will find their way to that place without instruction, but the instruction is about safety and security and self-respect and
well, it's really interesting. Like we keep doing these shows, and then like a few years later, the premise of the show or the what the show is ends up being a hot button issue. A sex ed show got us tossed out of our building. We did the show The Other America, which was sort of a second version of a show that Nora had done about Anne Braden.
Right.
And The Other America is like, it's what a conservative would call critical race theory, because it deals with lynching and redlining and
history.
Yeah.
Well, it's just history, but
it talks about Fountain Ferry Park and the Braden, Anne Braden and the Wade story, the Wade house. And then we have our longest running show would be considered social and emotional learning, which I can't believe is like a bad thing in the eyes of conservatives, but
it's teaching empathy, which is what they don't want kids to be learning, I guess. But yeah, that's our main bread and butter is that show, teaching social emotional learning, which
they connect to critical race theory. The like conservative view is that social and emotional learning then connects to teaching critical race theory. So we're like that's literally right. Those are like two of our shows, like our young kid show and our middle.
We must be doing something right.
Well, I hadn't heard that particular sort of aspect of the argument.
Oh, really?
Emotional. That's so weird because basically it just seems like they're against people being human beings.
Yeah. They're against thinking for yourself and being different. I always I remember when we did The Emperor's New Clothes, a teacher asked me about it, and I asked us about are you worried about putting all this politics into a children's show, and I said, well, the nature of the show is that you think for yourself. Like the end of Emperor's New Clothes, there's not really an ending, right? You're just supposed to decide how you feel about everybody agreeing that the emperor was wearing clothes, except for the one character saying that the emperor's naked. And I said, I dare you to tell me not to teach kids to think for themselves.
Yeah.
Well, I'm the people we've been talking about actually could make a very good argument for that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's true.
a very involved argument, not a good argument, but an involved argument.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, 25 years. Did you ever think it would last 25 years? Were you always really confident that it would be?
No, we've had many close calls of shutting down, mainly 2008, which is the year I met Shawn, but also the year of the financial crash. And Jess and I were the only staff at the time, and we were both fired, for lack of a better term. There was no money to pay us.
Yeah.
So we had to keep paying our rent. And so we paid our rent and not us. And around that time, Jess stuck around a little while longer, and then just couldn't live with the financial strain anymore of living this life. It's a hard life, the gig income and living grant to grant. And she decided to go pursue another career that was more financially stable, which is always this little lure of you could be more financially stable if you really wanted. And at that time, I was not done. I didn't feel the same way. And Shawn had shown up and had new energy. And so again, a lot of times with Squallis, I listen to the cosmos. I'm an old hippie. And so when things, present themselves, I try to listen and not fight things. And so it just seemed to fit that we continue, and we try to continue Squallis with Shawn. But a lot of the board at the time didn't think it was a good idea that we should just stop in 2008. And really that was just one chapter and then the next. So I'm glad we didn't. We had a lot more work to do.
And I'm not going to use any of the words concerning it, but this last couple of years must have been a very big challenge too.
That was another time we thought we were going under. Yeah, for sure. We had our best year ever in 2019. We had 6 staff for the first time. That was the most staff we ever had. I didn't know if we could have sustained that for much longer with or without COVID, but we had our most income, the most programs, the most staff. The weekend that COVID hit, we were supposed to perform Peter and the Wolf
with the orchestra,
the Louisville Orchestra, and Bread and Puppet was supposed to come that very same. It was a very big weekend, March 21st and March 20th. It all got canceled, and so that was hard. Along with all of our touring programs getting canceled, all of our income getting canceled. But luckily, there was a lot of support here from nonprofit support and arts organizations and individuals. People gave us grants, the PPP loan.
Yeah.
The Fund for the Arts supported us creating virtual programming. And so we got to kind of evolve. Yeah. Anything we did live, we recorded and turned it to a virtual program so kids can still have fun stuff while they're stuck at home. Like we totally pivoted like we've always done. We always try to listen and respond instead of staying stuck in what we think we want to do. We gotta listen and we gotta respond. Yeah. So we turned virtual. Yeah, we survived.
If it hadn't been for the Fund for the Arts, the Kentucky Arts Council, Community Foundation of Louisville, we wouldn't be around. I mean, they kept us
going. and that's true. There was a lot of support locally. I hope that was true in other cities, but I felt kind of proud of Louisville in that moment. Yeah. But also the thing I observed during that whole time is that, in a way, not that I wanted any any artists in town to have to go through that, but that artists are built to adapt. That's in a way, that maybe not other people are. It's like you get creative, your ingenuity comes up, that in a way it's like artists might be the ones who would survive or even thrive in a certain way, depending on the person and what they're trying to do.
You gotta have some grit.
Tears, I have to admit. Like I remember recording my shows and I hit pause and I would just cry. I'd hit record and keep going. It was very emotional. Well, it did feel like the end for a little bit.
I think it's important to recognize that the reason that was so hard for you and for Squallis was that we're a touring company. Like we're not a theater company. We don't put on big performances anymore. Really, not very often, and we tour, and really where our heart is. Our heart is in these shows where we have 200 kids sitting, you know, in a cafeteria on some dirty old tater tots from lunch, and we're like, you know, making them laugh and teaching them something. And so when we couldn't do that for a couple of years, it was sad. When we went back out for the first time, I think our first show after all of that was Rageosaurus Rex, which is this show that we keep bringing up. And we were in front of like maybe 150 kids in Indiana at this little school. And I always give the curtain speech. And I went out to start giving the curtain speech, and I thought I was going to cry. And I don't cry very often. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to cry in front of all these kids. Hi, kids.
I bet most of them have been seeing more adults cry in the last 2 years than they ever.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Well, and what we soon realized was, so that I think they were first graders, and they had been in virtual education their whole life. Like they had never been at a school assembly before, because they had kindergarten and preschool on NTI style. So we were like their first assembly, first like fun thing at school. And so of course they loved it. They flipped out. We were all, you know, extra hammy, all about, you know, we all had our masks on, which is challenging to perform with a mask for I guess more than a year. So I used my face a lot when I perform. And so it was kind of like cutting off part of my tools, but it still was a really heartwarming experience. And realizing that every time we performed for first grade and younger, we were probably the first assembly they had seen ever, because their little lives had just been mostly virtual. So that felt very important to bring some joy to that moment.
Well, one last question, you know, since Nora, particularly you, since you founded this, you didn't think you'd go 25 years, but now do you plan a lot for the future? Like, is there a, not that you're ready to retire or anything like that, you're all very young, but do you think about the company continuing and how you will do that? Is there any kind of thoughts about succession or anybody coming in to take over more important roles in the organization?
Yeah, I mean, we've tried that a few times. We're curious about that option. It's a hard role to fill. It's a lot to ask of anybody. I don't know who else would be willing to do it, but
you have to find that other Nora, that other person just like you, but like a certain number of years younger who can pick it up.
Yeah, well, and I think too, with Squallis being so, I don't know the right word, valuable. I think when people come and work with us, it may be seeming that it could be anything. But after 25 years, I've learned a lot of things the hard way. And so there are things where I'm like, I know what works a little bit better than what might not work, or what's important in an organization as versus an artist. And so it's hard to find people who might want to support that organizational level of running something like that versus who just want to be puppeteers. And so it has been a challenge.
We're more, I mean, I think to Nora's point, Squallis is almost more of a social service agency than a puppet company. The kind of work we do with kids and the kind of work we do in schools. And this is why Nora went back to school to get her social work degree, to really, you know, you've said for years that you didn't feel like you had the right tools, or that you were doing, you know, good work, but you didn't quite know how to express it or put words to it. And now you're getting this degree to do that.
Well, when you put a puppet on a kid's hand, sometimes stuff comes out that you don't know how to handle as an artist. And I mean like traumatic stuff or things that aren't funny. And I was like, wow, this is a tool. This is a tool to help young people connect to things they can't connect to just being in their own skin. And I found that really inspiring to dig deeper about that. And so that really did inspire me to go back to school to get those skills. And so when you ask about the future of Squallis, I imagine trying to figure out ways to meld social work ethics and the things I'm learning about how to create change in individuals or groups, or even at the bigger level. They always talk about micro, macro, and meso in social work, which I love because you can affect change in all three of those levels. And to me, what I'm bringing to social work is art is the tool to do that. And so I'm thrilled to be experimenting with this new ingredient of social work. because it has been at the core of all my work, and I could never put my finger on it until I started going to these classes, and I'm like, I've been doing this the whole time and I didn't know it. So it's exciting. It's exciting to have new inputs.
You've just been getting by all these years on those natural human qualities like empathy and
that's right,
emotional intelligence and all those things. That
loving kids. I just love kids.
What about you know, is it something that could be like the family business? Have you had enough interest from you know, your daughter and like to go forward?
That's a funny question. My daughter and I performed for the first time together this year. I needed someone to fill in a role. Mouse Tale is our latest show, and she stepped right in. And of course, she's a natural. She's been watching me my whole life. She's funny. She's a performer in her own right. She's a great puppeteer, and she had to get a full-time job to pay her bills. So I had to let her go, which I'm very sad about. I wish I could afford to pay her what she's making at a real job, but I can't. And so I don't know. I would hope she would consider it, but I want her to be financially stable, unlike her mother.
Well,
so,
and our son Oscar's been all over Squallis, and he's participated so much and made puppets too. And so, yeah, you know, we'll see.
Well, I think that about does it for our time today. So Nora Christensen and Shawn Hennessey, the people that are the heart and soul of Squallis Puppeteers, which is now celebrating their 25th anniversary, doing all these wonderful things in Louisville, Kentucky. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much.
All right.
All right. Bye.